The thing about a life that looks good from the outside is that nobody asks what it costs to maintain it. Seraphine Calloway-Voss had mastered the kind of entrance that made people assume everything was fine. Shoulders back, half smile, eyes that said, "I'm exactly where I want to be." 36 years old, 13 years married, and she'd been doing it so long she sometimes forgot it was a performance. Nashville, Tennessee. A Tuesday in late August, the kind where the asphalt goes soft by 9 a.m. and the air sits on you like wet wool. She was standing at the kitchen window of the house on Wexler Road, watching the backyard sprinklers arc and retreat, the same 6:47 a.m. routine they'd been running all summer. The coffee maker sputtered behind her. 15 years old, that thing. It sounded like it was filing a formal complaint. She'd mentioned replacing it twice. Thaddeus had said sure, babe both times, and nothing had happened, because nothing Seraphine said about the house ever actually happened, unless she made it happen herself. She poured the coffee into the mug she'd gotten at the Charlotte Avenue Farmers Market 3 summers ago, chipped now on the handle, a hairline crack she kept meaning to fix with the food-safe epoxy she'd bought and never opened. She drank from the chipped side anyway. She drank her coffee standing up. Thaddeus Voss, 47, was, on paper and at dinner parties, a good man, commercial director at a mid-sized real estate development firm headquartered downtown, the kind of company that had its name on 2 hotel projects and a mixed-use development near the Gulch. He wore suits well. He had a firm handshake and a voice built for commanding rooms. Low, unhurried, the kind of voice that made people think he'd considered everything before speaking. He could hold a conversation about bourbon, Tennessee football, and market interest rates with the same easy confidence, and people found themselves nodding before they'd consciously agreed with anything. Seraphine had fallen in love with that voice at 22 at a company happy hour she'd attended as a +1 for a coworker. He'd been holding a glass of red wine and half smiling at something someone else said, and she'd thought, that's someone who knows exactly who he is. She was still learning, 13 years later, what that actually meant. They didn't have kids. That was a conversation that had started and stopped so many times, she'd stopped thinking of it as open. Thaddeus had his reasons. She'd accepted them. She'd accepted a lot of things, honestly. In that slow, gradual way where you don't notice the weight accumulating until your shoulders hurt all the time, and you can't remember when they didn't. The first sign she could point to, though she understood now that pointing to a first was mostly a way to avoid admitting she'd seen all of them, she'd just named them other things, was the phone. Not that he left it somewhere suspicious, nothing that obvious. It was the angle. For the first 9-10 years of marriage, Thaddeus kept his phone face up on whatever surface was nearest. Kitchen counter, nightstand, dashboard. Nothing to hide. You absorb someone's habits without noticing. You know what their normal looks like before you've consciously cataloged it. Then, somewhere around 18 months ago, the phone started going face down. Not every time, not dramatically, just as a new default. Kitchen counter, face down. Nightstand, face down. Coffee table during TV, face down. She hadn't said anything. She told herself he was probably trying to be more present. They'd had exactly one conversation about screens at dinner, back in 2021. Maybe it had stuck. She told herself things for a long time. The gym was January. That one she'd actually been happy about. Thaddeus, who hadn't been inside a gym since his early 40s and who made fun of guys who suddenly got obsessed with spin class, joined a Lifetime Fitness off West End Avenue and started going 3 mornings a week. She'd said good for you, babe, and meant it. He'd bought new workout clothes. She'd done the laundry without looking twice. The cologne was subtler. He switched from the one he'd worn since before the marriage. She'd bought him a bottle every birthday, knew the weight of it by feel, to something new, lighter. He said the old one was discontinued. She looked it up later. It wasn't. 1 brick at a time. She was building something she didn't want to see the shape of. The morning that would become the dividing line started the way most of them did. She'd been to the Publix on Murphy Road, not the one on Charlotte, which had the parking situation from hell on weekday afternoons. a lesson she'd learned and relearned until she'd just permanently rerouted. Salmon, jasmine rice, the sparkling water Thaddeus preferred, and a bunch of sunflowers because they were $3 and she liked them even if nobody else in the house cared. She put everything away, found the sunflowers a spot on the entry table. Then she picked up Thaddeus's blazer from the back of the dining chair where he'd left it that morning. The man had not successfully put a jacket on a hanger without being prompted in 13 years of marriage, and carried it toward the hall closet. She checked the pockets first, out of habit, nothing more. She'd found pens, parking stubs, the occasional grocery receipt, little breadcrumbs of someone's day. She wasn't looking for anything. The paper was folded twice. She unfolded it on autopilot. Hermitage Hotel, Suite 412, June 9th 11. 2 nights, breakfast included. She looked at it for a long moment. June 9th 11. She counted back. That was the weekend of the real estate conference in Memphis, the one Thaddeus had packed for Thursday night, texted her from on Friday, come home from Sunday looking vaguely tired and smelling of hotel soap. The Hermitage Hotel was not in Memphis. The Hermitage Hotel was on 6th Avenue North, 15 minutes from their house. She stood in the hallway with the receipt in her hand, and the AC kicked on with that low rattle it always made before catching its hum. And somewhere down the street, the Hendersons' dog was going at it again. And the sunflowers on the entry table were the exact yellow of the kitchen she'd grown up in. And she noted all of this with a strange, precise clarity. She folded the paper back into its original creases, put it back in the pocket, hung up the blazer, walked to the living room, picked up the remote, sat down. The true crime documentary she'd been halfway through was still paused. Some woman in front of a wall of case files, expression completely flat. Seraphine pressed play. She watched 22 minutes before realizing she hadn't processed a single word. She didn't cry that night. She made the salmon, made the rice, set the table. Thaddeus came home at 6:58, loosened his tie in the doorway the way he always did, said the house smelled good. She said thank you. They ate while the evening news ran low from the living room TV, and the kitchen faucet dripped that slow half-drip neither of them had fixed in 3 months, and neither of them said anything that meant anything. She didn't look for the receipt again. She didn't need to. She'd memorized it. Suite 412, 2 nights, breakfast included. Later, when he'd gone to shower, she sat at the kitchen table in the dark with her hands around a mug of chamomile gone cold. The dog down the street had finally quieted. A car went past on Wexler. The street settled back into itself. She thought about 13 years, about the girl at 22 who'd looked across a happy hour and thought he knows exactly who he is. About all the small adjustments she'd made since. Opinions softened, plans shelved, the space she'd learned to take up less of. About the paper in the pocket, about Memphis. She wasn't sure how long she sat there. At some point Thaddeus came out in his sleep clothes, poured a glass of water, said, "You coming to bed?" She said in a minute. He went to bed. She stayed until the faucet dripped 9 times and she'd counted everyone. Then she went too. Lay down in the dark next to the man she'd built a life around. Listened to his breathing slow into sleep. Stared at the ceiling. The AC rattled twice before it caught. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't sleep. Not really. She did that thing where the body goes horizontal and the eyes close and the breathing slows enough to fool someone watching. But the mind just keeps running, looping back, circling the same fixed point, unable to land anywhere else. 3 a.m., 3:40, 4 something. The ceiling didn't change. The AC rattled. Thaddeus slept on his side with his back to her, the way he'd been sleeping for about a year now, and she lay there in the dark, cataloging the things she'd told herself were nothing. The phone, face down. The gym, January West End Avenue, 3 mornings a week. New workout clothes she'd laundered without a second thought. The cologne, the switched brand, the discontinued excuse she'd quietly checked and found to be a lie. 1 brick at a time. At 5:15, she got up. She didn't go back to bed. Thaddeus left at 7:32. She watched his car clear the end of Wexler from the upstairs window, then waited 4 minutes, the amount of time it took him to get far enough that turning back for something forgotten was unlikely, and went to his home office. She wasn't proud of it. That's the thing nobody talks about. You feel like a criminal in your own house. She stood in the doorway of the room she'd decorated, the desk she'd helped him pick, the shelves she'd organized, the photo of the two of them in Asheville from 4 years ago on the credenza, the two of them squinting into afternoon sun, both of them smiling, and she felt like a trespasser. She went in anyway. His laptop was on the desk. No password. They'd never done that. Never thought they needed to. She felt something sick for a moment about how much she'd trusted the absence of locks. She opened his email first. The inbox was too clean. No promotions, no newsletters, no forwarded office nonsense from Baxter Connell. He'd been deleting things. She searched Hermitage and got nothing. Searched hotel and got 3 2022 results. A company event at the Omni in Atlanta, a client dinner at the Thompson downtown. Nothing else. She sat back. Okay. She found his Google account still logged in on the browser. Opened Maps, went to his timeline. June 9th, a Friday. His route left the house at 8:42 a.m., took I-40 west, toward Memphis just like he'd said. She followed the blue line, 45 minutes out. Then, she almost missed it, the dot so small, the route bent. Came back east. Returned to Nashville by 11 a.m. He'd driven 45 minutes toward Memphis. Turned around. Checked into the Hermitage Hotel by 11 and stayed until Sunday. She closed the laptop. The office smelled faintly of his old cologne, the supposedly discontinued one still in the fabric of the chair. She'd bought him that chair. He'd asked for good lumbar support. She'd spent 2 hours reading reviews. She stood up, steadied herself against the edge of the desk, and went downstairs to make another cup of coffee from the sputtering machine. She texted Mirembe Adeyemi at 9:15. 3 words. Can you talk? Mirembe had owned a salon on Gallatin Pike for 11 years. She was the kind of person who could read a text the way others read faces. Her phone rang 2 minutes later. What happened? Mirembe said. Not a question. I don't have all of it yet, Seraphine said, but I think I know what I'm looking at. Okay. Background noise. A blow dryer, someone laughing, music low. What do you need? I need to think out loud with someone who isn't going to tell me I'm being crazy. You have never been crazy a day in your life, Mirembe said. Come in tonight. I'll stay late. It was the Instagram that confirmed everything. She almost didn't check. Thaddeus barely used his account. Company project updates, occasional reposts. She'd never had reason to look. She checked at 11:47 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table with her second coffee going cold. He'd posted 3 days ago. Sedona, Arizona, red rock formations, late afternoon light, a restaurant terrace with string lights catching the dusk. She scrolled through the carousel slowly. Third photo. A table for 2. 2 wine glasses, a charcuterie board, the canyon behind it going amber. Fourth photo. A woman. Seraphine registered the wrist before the face. Right wrist, angled toward the camera, holding a wine glass. Gold bracelet. Crescent moon pendant. The light catching it the way light catches something it knows. That bracelet. Thaddeus had given it to her on their wedding day. Not at the ceremony. In the hotel room that morning, before everything started. He'd said, because you light up everything you walk into. She'd worn it for 13 years. Lost it 2 summers ago on a trip to Savannah. Put it somewhere safe and came home to find it gone. She'd searched for weeks. Thought it had slipped between the floorboards. Felt genuinely sick about it for months. The woman wearing it was 28 maybe. Clear eyes, light hair, the easy, relaxed smile of someone who had no idea what was on her wrist. Seraphine zoomed in until the image pixelated. Then she read the comments. Looks amazing! You guys should check out the chapel. Sedona is everything, Thad. You deserve this. That last one from Baxter Connell, Thaddeus's colleague. The one who'd eaten her potato salad at the 4th of July barbecue 2 years ago and said it was the best he'd ever had. Seraphine set the phone down on the table, face up this time. She looked at it for a while. Then she picked it up and went to the woman's profile. Public account. Evangeline Reese, 28, Nashville. Lifestyle content, hiking trails, brunch spots, yoga, a life documented in the way that made everything look easy and weightless. Nothing incriminating on its face. Just someone moving through the world without any apparent awareness of the damage being done in the margins of her photographs. Seraphine scrolled back 7 months. A photo at Pinewood Social, the one on 4th with the bowling lanes and the pool. Thaddeus wasn't in it, but in the comments, a reply she recognized. Thaddeus, Nashville. She went back further. 8 months, a story highlight labeled, People. She couldn't open it. It had expired, but one thumbnail at the edge showed a man's shoulder in a suit she recognized. The cut, the color, the particular way it sat. She put the phone down. Her jaw ached. She'd been clenching it for 40 minutes without noticing. She stood, rinsed her mug, set it in the drying rack, wiped down the counter, folded the dish towel over the oven handle the way she always did. Then she sat back down and called Valentina Oduya. Valentina was a family law attorney she'd met through a mutual friend 4 years ago, one of those low-key connections she'd maintained out of what she'd told herself was just good sense. You never knew. Turns out she'd known somewhere. She'd always known. Val, she said when the line picked up, I need to ask you some things. Not officially yet, but I want to understand what I'm looking at. Valentina didn't ask anything unnecessary. Talk to me, she said. Seraphine spent the rest of the afternoon doing things she'd never imagined doing. She photographed the hotel receipt, still in the blazer pocket, still folded in its original creases, exactly where she'd left it. She screenshotted the Instagram post. She made a handwritten list on the back of a Publix receipt. Nothing digital, nothing in a shared cloud. Of every date and discrepancy she could place, the Memphis weekend, the Sedona trip he'd called a quick thing with a client from Austin, 3 Thursday nights in March when he'd said he was late at the office, and whose location on his phone, checked quietly at 2 a.m. while he slept, had shown him parked near Midtown for hours. She wasn't shaking anymore. That surprised her. She'd expected shaking, or crying, or the impulse to break something. Instead, it felt like the opposite. Like something that had been vibrating at a frequency just below hearing had finally gone still. The world had gotten very specific, very quiet. She knew what she was looking at. She knew already what she was going to do. She just needed to do it right. Mirembe kept the salon open past 9. Seraphine sat in the chair and Mirembe stood behind her, working without words at first, hands steady, moving the way they always did when she understood someone needed to settle before they could speak. The salon smelled like keratin treatment and the vanilla candle near the front desk. Outside, the street was quiet. A bus passed. Headlights swept across the ceiling in a slow arc. Eventually, Seraphine told her everything. The blazer, the receipt, the Google timeline, the Instagram, the bracelet. Mirembe's hands stilled for just a moment, then kept moving. 13 years, Seraphine said. I kept thinking I was imagining things. You weren't. No. She looked at herself in the mirror, the shadows under her eyes she'd been concealing for weeks, the jaw that hadn't unclenched and she couldn't remember how long. I wasn't. Mirembe met her eyes in the reflection and held them. What do you want to do? Seraphine looked at herself for a long time, the woman in the mirror who'd been performing fine for so long she'd half forgotten what the real version felt like. I want to do this right, she said, quietly, all the way through. Mirembe nodded once. Then that's what we're going to do. She went back to work with the comb, and the salon hummed around them, fluorescent lights, the low drift of traffic outside. And Seraphine Calloway-Voss sat very still and decided, not with drama or tears, but cleanly and completely, that she was done. She pulled out her phone, opened a new note, began writing. Dates, names, details, everything she remembered and everything she could still prove. The screen glowed in the mirror behind her. Mirembe said nothing. Outside, a car alarm went off 2 blocks away, then stopped. She gave herself 3 days to fall apart. Not in front of anyone, not in front of Thaddeus. God, not him. But alone, in the early mornings before he woke, she allowed herself the full weight of it. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the cold tub and let the grief do what grief does when you stop managing it. Ugly, private, silent. The tile was freezing against her bare feet. She didn't move. 3 mornings. Then she stood up. Not because the pain was gone. It wasn't, and she knew it wouldn't be for a long time. But she'd made a decision in the chair at Mirembe's salon, with the fluorescent lights humming and the street quiet outside. And decisions have a momentum of their own once you've really committed to them. She'd felt it settle in her chest like something clicking into place. She was not going to blow this. She was going to do it right. She called Valentina from the parking lot of the Whole Foods on West End. Engine running. Heat off even though the morning was cold enough to see her breath on the glass. She'd written her questions in the small notepad she'd started keeping in her purse. The one Thaddeus would never look at, because Thaddeus had not once in 13 years of marriage looked at a grocery receipt. Asset division in Tennessee. Marital property versus separate property. How length of marriage affected the calculation. What income disparity meant for the alimony conversation. 13 years and a significant income gap. You're in a strong position, Valentina said. But I want you documenting, quietly, everything you can access without alerting him. I already started. A pause. How far along? 2 nights ago, 1 in the morning, he was asleep. She watched a woman push a cart across the parking lot, a toddler in the basket seat eating something orange. Tax returns 2019 through 2023, mortgage statement, 2 investment account summaries, his business expense reports. Valentina was quiet for a full second. Okay, send those to my personal email, not the firm address. And listen, don't move money, don't close anything, don't change anything yet, just watch. I'm watching. Good. Another pause. And find somewhere to stay. Not yet, but have it ready. She found the apartment on a Thursday. She told Thaddeus she was meeting a former co-worker for lunch near downtown. He nodded without looking up from his laptop. She drove to East Nashville, the stretch off Gallatin Pike she'd always liked, walkable blocks with old craftsman houses converted into coffee shops and small businesses, a Thai place she'd eaten at twice and wanted to go back to. The building on Fatherland Street was 3 stories. Brick, nothing fancy. The property manager showed her the 3rd-floor unit. 1 bedroom, smaller than Wexler by a lot. Galley kitchen, bathroom tile that was slightly behind the decade, but the windows faced east. She stood on the small balcony and looked at the street below. A man walking a dog, a woman locking her bike to a signpost, a tree at the corner that had just started turning at the edges, amber threading through the green. She took it. First and last month, written on a check from her personal account, the one she'd kept from before the marriage and never fully merged, one of the few things she'd held on to with a stubbornness she hadn't been able to explain to herself at the time. She understood it now. She paid cash for a key copy at the hardware store on Woodland Street on the way home. Put it in the innermost zippered pocket of her work bag, the bag he never touched. Mirembe came over on a Saturday while Thaddeus played golf with Percival Drummond and 2 clients out in Brentwood. He'd mentioned the outing 3 times in the preceding week. Casually, the way you mention things you want on the record. Seraphine had said have fun all 3 times without any register in her voice. Mirembe arrived with 2 large coffees from the shop on Porter Road and sat down at the kitchen table like she was ready to work. Because she was. They went through everything Seraphine had compiled. Screenshots, date logs, the photographed documents, The timeline she'd built in a Notes app on a separate Apple ID she'd created specifically for this, downloaded and logged into once, and never from a shared device. "This is thorough," Mirembe said, scrolling. "I know." "Seraphine." She looked up. "This is really thorough. I had time." She wrapped both hands around her coffee, the cup still warm enough to matter. "He thinks I spend my evenings watching TV." Mirembe was quiet a moment. "How are you actually doing?" "I'm okay." She meant it more than she expected to. "Mornings are hardest, but once I'm up and I have something to do, it gets easier." "Does he suspect anything?" Seraphine almost laughed. "No." She looked at the kitchen she'd designed every surface of. "He never did. That's the thing about Thaddeus. He never imagined I was capable of something he hadn't thought of first." Mirembe's jaw tightened just slightly. "The Stonehaven dinner," Seraphine said. "Tell me what you know about it." Mirembe's salon did hair for two of the wives of Thaddeus's business partners, a fact that had never come up between them and now felt like the universe had been holding in reserve. "Annual thing," Mirembe said. "Stonehaven Grill, 5th Avenue, 3rd Friday of October. It's their biggest night. Clients, partners, board members. Thaddeus is usually one of the focal points. You've gone every year." "Every year." She'd worn a different dress each time. Remembered spouses' names, kids' names, which clients preferred to talk football versus business. She'd run the social side of his career for a decade, and it had become so seamless it had turned invisible. "I want to go this year." Mirembe looked at her. "On your own?" "On my own terms." She tightened her hands around the cup. "I want to walk in looking like the version of myself I stopped letting myself be. I want every person in that room who's shaken my hand for 10 years to see me and understand something without me having to say a word." A beat. "And I want him to see her in that room," Seraphine said. "In my chair, with that bracelet on her wrist." Mirembe set her coffee down. "Okay," she said. "Then that's what we're building toward." The preparation surprised her. She'd expected it to feel like a countdown. Tense, adrenaline-edged, every hour bringing the moment closer. Instead, it felt like clarity, like finally being allowed to do the thing she'd been trained to do without knowing she was being trained. 13 years of corporate dinners, client events, seating arrangements, name recall. 13 years of managing every social variable in Thaddeus's orbit so that his world ran smoothly and he could take the credit. She knew exactly how that room worked. She'd been running it from the background. Now she just had to walk into it. She found the dress on a Sunday while Thaddeus watched football downstairs. The crowd noise drifting up, his occasional commentary, the ordinary sounds of a house that didn't know what was coming. She'd bought the dress 2 years ago, tried it on, thought this is too much for wherever I'm going, and hung it back. Wine-colored. Clean-cut. Nothing loud about it. Just certain of itself in a way she hadn't been ready for at the time. She was ready now. She booked Mirembe for the Friday afternoon of the dinner, told Thaddeus she'd be running errands. He said, "Sure, babe," eyes already back on his phone. She called Valentina and confirmed the paperwork could move quickly after. Not filed yet. Just positioned. Valentina said she'd hold the slot. Every morning she checked the key in her work bag. Just to know it was there. Just to know she had somewhere to go. The week before the dinner, Thaddeus was almost kind. That was the part she hadn't braced for. He brought home takeout from the Thai place on Broadway she'd mentioned liking once, 8 months ago, and he'd remembered. He complimented her on a rearrangement she'd made in the living room. He touched her shoulder in the kitchen in passing, the way he used to early on, and she kept her face exactly right and said thank you in the exact right tone. She hated that more than the betrayal somehow. The way someone who knows all your soft places can deploy kindness like a feint. She ate the takeout, said it was good, because it was. Laughed at the right moments in the show they'd been half-watching for weeks. She was very, very good at this. At night, after he slept, she made the list in her head. The key, the documents, the apartment, Valentina, Mirembe, the dress, the shoes. Block heel found at the DSW on West End, the kind you could walk in without having to think about walking. Everything was in place. She just had to get to Friday. Thursday night. Bathroom. Cold water running. The faucet she'd stopped complaining about. She stood at the sink washing her face, cleanser foam still on her cheeks, and looked at herself in the mirror. She thought about the woman she'd been at 22, all the space she'd taken up then, before she'd learned to make herself smaller to fit the shape someone else had decided was appropriate. She rinsed, dried her face on the hand towel from the Home Goods on Charlotte, the ones she'd bought 3 years ago that had held up better than anything else in the house. She looked at herself one more time, long enough to recognize who was looking back. She turned off the bathroom light. In the bedroom, Thaddeus was already asleep. She climbed in, set her alarm for 6, pulled the blanket up. In the closet, the wine-colored dress hung on its own hanger, separate from everything else. Tomorrow was Friday. The screen of her phone on the nightstand went dark. Friday came the way important days always do. Quietly, without announcement, indistinguishable from any other morning until you remembered what it was. Seraphine's alarm went off at 6. She turned it off before the second buzz. Thaddeus didn't move. She got up, made coffee from the machine that still sounded like it was filing a formal complaint with someone, and stood at the kitchen window watching the backyard come into the early light. The grass was wet from overnight. The flagstone path held a thin line of moisture along its edges. From the neighbor's oak, the one that dropped leaves into their yard every fall, the one Seraphine raked herself because Thaddeus always had something else going on. A cardinal was making a lot of noise about something. She drank her coffee standing up. Same as every morning. Except it wasn't. Thaddeus came downstairs at 7:20, already in the charcoal suit he'd mentioned twice this week was the one I wear to the Stonehaven thing. He poured coffee, checked his phone, told her the dinner started at 7 and he'd get there by 6:45, walk the room before people arrived. "You should come," he said, the tone of someone completing an obligation they'd forgotten the original purpose of. "I'll see," she said. He looked up briefly. She looked back with the expression she'd been practicing, pleasant, neutral, nothing behind it. He looked back down. "Don't wait up if you're tired," he said. "Okay." He left at 7:44. She stood at the window until his car turned the corner. Then she put her mug in the sink and went upstairs to start getting ready. Mirembe's salon on Gallatin Pike smelled the way it always did. Keratin treatment and the vanilla candle near the front desk, and something underneath that was just the particular air of a place that had held a lot of women telling the truth for over a decade. Seraphine sat down at 2 p.m. Mirembe worked without much talking, which was exactly what she needed. 2 other clients at opposite ends of the salon, neither paying attention to anyone but themselves. Music playing low. Something old, sad maybe, unhurried. When Mirembe was done, Seraphine looked in the mirror. Her hair the way she'd worn it before the marriage, before Thaddeus had mentioned once that it looked more polished, pulled back, and she'd started pulling it back without consciously deciding to. Her face without the extra layer of concealer she'd been running on for weeks. Just what she actually looked like, which turned out to be more than enough. "Well," Mirembe said. "Yeah," Seraphine said. Mirembe squeezed her shoulder once. Firm. Didn't say anything else. She dressed at the Fatherland Street apartment. The divorce paperwork wasn't filed yet. That was Monday. That was Valentina's domain. Everything in its proper sequence. Tonight the apartment was just a room with east-facing windows and a key that was hers. And it was where she went to put on the wine-colored dress and the block-heel shoes and the perfume she'd been keeping for an occasion that had never materialized until now. She stood in the small bathroom, dated tile, nothing like Wexler, and looked at herself the way you look when something real is at stake. She looked fine. She looked like herself. Those turned out to be the same thing. She picked up her bag, walked out, locked the door behind her. The Stonehaven Grill was on 5th Avenue North, the kind of place that had been hosting corporate dinners for 2 decades without needing to change much because it had gotten the formula right. Dark wood, low light, a jazz trio in the corner playing quietly enough for people to talk. White flowers on every table. The kind of room where everyone understood the social grammar before they walked in. Seraphine had been here 7 times in 10 years. She knew the valet situation. Cars backed up past 6. So she parked herself in the lot around the corner and walked the half-block. The hostess at the stand looked up with a professional smile, then paused, just briefly, the way people sometimes do. "Good evening," Seraphine said. "I'm with the Voss development party." "Of course. Right this way." She heard the room before she was fully in it, the low undertow of conversation, ice in glasses, the jazz trio on something slow, a burst of laughter from a far table, the acoustics of a full room that hasn't noticed something is about to shift. Seraphine paused at the threshold. She didn't rush it. She knew how rooms worked. She'd navigated enough of them to understand that arrival communicated before you said a word. The pace, the posture, the expression that said, "I am exactly where I intended to be." She walked in. The first person to notice was Gretchen Drummond, Percival's wife, someone Seraphine had sat next to at 3 of these dinners, always kind in the careful way of people who know more than they're saying. Gretchen's eyes found her and widened, just barely, and then her mouth did something complicated. The table nearest the entrance was next. A couple from Brentwood had been to the house for dinner once. The woman touched her husband's arm. He turned, table by table. The slow wave of it. Seraphine kept walking. She could see Thaddeus now, center of the room, positioned the way he always positioned himself, best sightlines, natural focal point. Talking to 2 men she didn't recognize, his full conference mode posture engaged, that voice she'd fallen in love with at 22 doing exactly what it was built for. There was a woman at his side, Evangeline Reese, pale ivory dress, hair down, right wrist angled slightly toward the table in front of her. The bracelet caught the restaurant's low light the way it had caught Arizona sunset in the photograph. She was laughing at something, genuinely, easily, leaning slightly into the conversation, and she was beautiful in the specific way of someone who has never had to think about the cost of anything. But as Seraphine got closer, she caught something else. A flicker, just a fraction of a second, Evangeline's eyes finding her over the shoulder of one of the men she didn't know, and something shifting in them. Not confusion. Something more specific than confusion. A calculation that happened fast and didn't land anywhere comfortable. She knew. Or she almost knew. Or she had the particular expression of someone who had told herself a story for long enough that the sight of its contradiction was starting to crack it. Seraphine kept walking. Close enough that Thaddeus, mid-sentence, caught the movement and turned. The freeze. The jaw stopping before the sentence was done. The particular color a face goes when the floor disappears under it. Seraphine. She didn't acknowledge it. She looked at Evangeline instead. Met her eyes, the calculation still running there. Slower now, like a program that had hit something it couldn't process. The smile was completely gone. Seraphine let her gaze move, slowly and without any hurry at all, from Evangeline's face to her right wrist. The bracelet, gold chain, crescent moon pendant, the small irregularity in the third link from the clasp where it had been repaired once, years ago, a detail you'd only know if you'd worn it long enough to memorize it by touch. She looked back up, held Evangeline's eyes. The room was at maybe 30% of its earlier volume. Not silent, but attending. "That's a beautiful bracelet," Seraphine said. Conversational, level, not loud. The room was already doing that work. "I have one exactly like it." She tilted her head just slightly. "I got mine on my wedding day." A beat, clean and long. From him. Nobody moved. Thaddeus made a sound that wasn't a word. Evangeline's face had gone the color of the white tablecloths. Whatever story she'd been telling herself, that he was complicated, that his marriage was over in every way that mattered, that what she'd taken didn't really belong to anyone. Seraphine watched it come apart in real time, not with satisfaction, with something more like clarity, She looked at Thaddeus then, really looked at him, the charcoal suit, the expression of a man who had spent 13 years believing he was the smartest person in every room he walked into. She let herself see him clearly, the way you see something clearly when you know it's the last time. She didn't have anything to say to him. She picked up the small clutch bag sitting on the chair beside Evangeline, the chair that had been Seraphine's chair at this dinner for a decade, the chair every person in this room had seen her in, and set it gently on the table in front of Evangeline, as if returning something that had been set down in the wrong place. Then she turned to Percival Drummond, standing 3 feet away with the expression of a man watching an accident he saw coming and couldn't stop. Percival. Pleasant. Easy. Tell Gretchen the lamb is always overcooked at these things. The fish is better. She turned, walked back toward the entrance. 10% volume now, maybe less. She nodded at the hostess, said thank you and meant it, pushed through the front door into the October night, car exhaust and distant rain and the specific cool of Tennessee in fall. She walked to her car, got in, sat with her hands on the steering wheel, the leather cold from the night air, the street moving quietly around her. She hadn't cried. She wasn't going to. Not tonight. She started the car, took the long way back, down Broadway, past the honky-tonks running full neon, across the bridge with the Cumberland going black and silver below. She drove at exactly the speed limit the whole way. Her phone lit up on the passenger seat. Again. By the time she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor on Fatherland Street, it had buzzed 19 times. She turned it face down on the kitchen counter, put the kettle on, stood in the galley kitchen in the wine-colored dress and waited for the water to boil. The kettle was the only sound in the apartment. It started to whistle. She turned off the burner, poured water over the tea bag, watched the color bloom slow and dark through the cup. The door was locked. She had the only key. The morning after, she slept until 8. No alarm. No listening for someone else's movements in the house. Just the east-facing windows doing what she'd chosen them for. Light, coming in slow and honest. Warming a stripe of the floor from the sill to the foot of the bed. She lay there for a while and just let it happen. Then she got up, made coffee in the French press she'd bought at the kitchen supply shop on Woodland Street, because the Fatherland apartment hadn't come with a coffee maker and she'd decided she wasn't taking the one from Wexler, even though she'd bought it herself 8 years ago. Let it stay there. She was done inheriting other people's spaces. She took her coffee to the balcony. Feet tucked under her, watched East Nashville wake up. A woman jogging past with a stroller, 2 guys in paint-stained clothes loading gear into a van, a tabby cat on a fence post 3 buildings down who was absolutely committed to ignoring everything happening around it. I could stay out here all morning, she thought. So she did. Valentina filed on a Monday. Thaddeus was served Tuesday afternoon at his office on Commerce Street. Valentina had warned her. This would likely be the moment he became unpredictable. Stay off shared communication. Let everything root through her. He called 12 times that afternoon. She listened to the first 3 voicemails. His voice moving through confused, then conciliatory, then something that wanted to sound controlled but wasn't. She deleted the remaining 9 without playing them. That evening he drove to Wexler Road and stood in the driveway of an empty house. She knew because the Ring camera, set up 2 years ago after a porch package went missing, was still linked to her phone. She watched him stand there for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. He looked at the front door, looked at his car, went back to his car. She was on her balcony on Fatherland Street, eating leftover Thai from the place 2 blocks over, watching the video with her feet up on the railing. She finished her dinner. The Stonehaven dinner traveled the way things travel in Nashville, fast and with detail. By the following Monday, Mirembe had heard 3 separate versions from 3 separate clients. By Wednesday it had reached someone's group chat that included 2 people on the board of Thaddeus's company. By end of week, Percival Drummond had requested a meeting with the firm's managing partners. Seraphine had not posted anything, had not called anyone, had not sent a single text about any of it. She hadn't needed to. Thaddeus had brought Evangeline to the most visible professional event on his calendar, had seated her in Seraphine's chair, had walked into a room full of business relationships with his wife's wedding bracelet on another woman's wrist. That was the story. She hadn't written a word of it. She'd just been there when it finished writing itself. Evangeline deactivated her Instagram the Saturday after the dinner. Mirembe heard it from a client who'd been at a different table that night and had been keeping watch. 3 weeks later, the account came back. Private, followers down by a third. The Sedona post was gone. Thaddeus's comment was gone. The People highlight had been deleted entirely. Seraphine thought about this for roughly 30 seconds. Then she thought about something else. The divorce took 11 months. Not because it dragged. Thaddeus had tried briefly to contest the asset division, and Valentina had produced documentation so thorough and organized that his attorney had apparently gone silent on the phone for a full 30 seconds before responding. After that, things moved. The house on Wexler Road sold in February. Seraphine's equity share, combined with the alimony Valentina had negotiated based on income disparity and length of marriage, meant she wasn't starting from nothing. She was starting from somewhere solid. That distinction felt like everything. She didn't attend the closing. She signed what needed signing and let the rest happen without her. Thaddeus moved to an apartment in Midtown, smaller than he was used to. The firm didn't let him go. They didn't make personnel decisions based on personal matters as a rule. But the 2 clients from the Stonehaven dinner, who quietly hadn't renewed their contracts the following quarter, were noticed. His role in the company did a slow, bureaucratic restructuring over the next 8 months. He went from being the face of the commercial division to being a name in an organizational chart. He and Evangeline were done by March. Seraphine heard this from Mirembe, who heard it from a client, who had it from someone who knew them both. She didn't try to verify it. It didn't change anything about her Tuesday. Spring came and she renegotiated her lease. She'd been turning it over since January. Whether to stay or find somewhere with more room, a second bedroom, actual space to be in a home the way she hadn't let herself be in years. She looked at 3 places: a duplex in Inglewood with a yard she liked, a condo near 5 Points, a second-floor unit on Shelby Avenue with high ceilings and built-in shelving that made her think about the books she'd put in storage because Thaddeus thought they cluttered the living room. She went back to Fatherland, the East Light, the street below, the way it felt like something she'd chosen, not something she'd ended up in. She got the books out of storage on a Saturday. 3 carloads, arms aching by the end. Stayed up past midnight arranging and rearranging, the floor buried in stacks, the specific smell of old paperbacks filling the apartment. She found books she'd forgotten she owned. Found a novel she'd been looking for since 2019. Spine already cracked from a beach vacation she'd taken the summer before she got married. She sat on the floor at midnight eating dry cereal from the box. She'd forgotten dinner and there wasn't much in the fridge yet. And she read the first chapter, surrounded by the mess of her own library. Shelves only half full. She felt completely fine. Better than fine, actually. She just didn't have a word for it yet. She went back to work full-time in April. She'd always worked, project manager at a mid-sized events firm downtown, the job Thaddeus used to call that little thing you do, said with the particular dismissiveness of someone who understood very well that her income and professional network had been quietly useful to him and chose to minimize it anyway. She was glad she'd kept it. More than glad. 2 new clients in April, a corporate retreat in May that went well enough the client asked for her by name for the fall event. She stopped leaving early out of some residual obligation to be home by a certain hour. She started taking real lunch breaks at a cafe on Church Street, sometimes alone with a book, sometimes with her co-worker Delia, who found something to laugh about every 10 minutes and had become, without pressure or announcement, someone Seraphine genuinely looked forward to. She didn't think about Thaddeus most days. When she did, it was specific and small, a scheduling habit built around his calendar that she had to consciously unlearn, or a restaurant she'd stopped going to because he didn't like it that she found herself going to again. Small reclamations, the kind that don't announce themselves as victories, but that build into something you eventually notice. August. Almost a full year from the morning she'd stood at the kitchen window on Wexler Road, watching the sprinklers and feeling the accumulated weight of a life she'd agreed to, piece by piece, without ever agreeing to the whole. She got a haircut at Mirembe's salon. Nothing dramatic, just an inch off, the shape she'd settled into since October. After they walked to the Thai place on Gallatin Pike and took a booth in the back and stayed 2 hours without noticing. Mirembe talked about a trip she was planning. Lisbon, then south along the coast, figure out the rest from there. Seraphine listened and somewhere around the second glass of wine thought, I want to do that. I want to go somewhere just because I want to go. She didn't say it out loud yet. She just let herself want it. That was new. Or not new. Old, actually. The oldest version of herself. The one that had existed before she'd learned to run every want through someone else's filter first, checking whether it fit, whether it was too much, whether it would require taking up space that had been quietly claimed. Mirembe poured the last of the wine and said, out of nowhere, You seem different. Different how? She considered it. Like you take up the right amount of space. Seraphine held her glass for a moment, looked at her friend across the table. 11 years of friendship, salon chairs and late dinners, and the kind of loyalty that shows up without being asked. Yeah, she said. I think I do. October again. 1 year. Almost exactly to the week. Seraphine woke at 7 without an alarm, the east window doing what it had been doing every morning since she moved in, light coming in warm and particular and hers. She lay still and listened. A bus on Gallatin 2 blocks over. The tabby cat that had migrated from the fence post to the fire escape outside her window and now considered the spot non-negotiable. She'd started leaving water out for it. It accepted this without acknowledgement, which felt about right. She got up, made coffee, took it to the balcony. The trees on Fatherland Street had turned, amber and rust, the ginkgo by the corner gone fully yellow, leaves starting to release in the light breeze. She watched one fall, slow and unhurried, taking its time. She thought about the morning a year ago when she'd stood at the kitchen window on Wexler Road, trying to count how many nights she had left to get through, the blazer pocket, the receipt folded in its original creases, the bracelet catching Arizona light on someone else's wrist. She thought about the woman she'd been in that kitchen. She didn't feel sorry for her. She felt something more precise, a recognition. The kind you have toward a version of yourself that was doing the best it could with what it knew. She'd loved Thaddeus. She'd built something real from real material. The fact that he'd treated it carelessly didn't unmake the years she'd put in. It just meant she wasn't putting any more in. Nobody tells you that part, that you don't get a clean slate, that you don't walk away lighter necessarily, just differently weighted, that the life on the other side of the hard thing isn't a reward for surviving it. It's just a life, your life, the one you get to actually live in now. The coffee went warm in her hands. A neighbor's wind chimes picked up somewhere below. She opened the notebook she'd been keeping since the first morning here. The handwriting slightly unsteady on that first page. The sentence about the space she'd been too small to fill. She didn't read it back. She turned to a blank page and wrote the date at the top. Then she put the pen down without writing anything else. Some mornings didn't need recording. Some mornings were just for being in. She showered, dressed, walked to the cafe on Porter Road, the one with the good cortado and the window seat that kept the light until noon. She brought a book. She ordered without checking what time it was. She read for an hour and a half, unhurried, in a chair she'd chosen for no reason except that she felt like sitting in it. Nobody needed anything from her. She didn't need anything from anyone. It was ordinary in every detail, entirely, quietly, undeniably hers. There's a version of this story where Seraphine stays, where she finds the receipt, folds it back up, puts it in someone else's pocket, and adds it to the weight she's already been carrying for years, where she does the math on the cost of leaving and decides the price is too high, where she's still standing at that kitchen window on Wexler Road 5 years from now, watching the sprinklers run their 6:47 routine, counting the mornings. A lot of people are standing at that window right now. If you've ever folded something back up and put it in someone else's pocket, what would it have taken for you to keep it? Thanks for watching. Your feedback is very important to our work, so please leave a comment telling us what you think and where you are watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Your participation is very important for us to continue our work, so please share this with anyone who would love this story.